With Spencer, you guys gave him the field goals in that preseason finale. Where do you feel like he is heading into the season?
I think Spencer had a really productive preseason. Certainly did well in the preseason games. Felt like, kind of like we've talked about before, he got better every single week. He's kicking better now in training camp and the end of training camp than he was in OTA. So feel really positive about where he's at mentally and physically, and looking forward to see him continue to grow throughout the season.
Chop, go ahead.
Brian, as a special teams guy, I guess you never really know during camp and preseason who your guys are going to be because of how rosters are formed. But by and large, your guys, are these the guys that you sort of anticipated, or there are always a couple of surprises when the team has to cut this guy, that guy for roster purposes?
Yeah, I think good question, Chad. The hardest thing to predict, as you go through training camp, because you're really the biggest thing you're trying to rep the most of with the same cohesive unit is the punt team to try and make sure those guys are all working together. But you can never predict injuries, and there's always injuries that come up throughout training camp. Like losing Hunter Wooler certainly was a key injury for us on special teams, and he was having a great training camp. So those are things like you can never predict, and that will change how the roster makeup ends up being formed once some of those injuries and things happen. You can kind of predict. We know there's a set of guys that are going to make the team. There's a set of guys that are on the bubble, and you try to rep some of those guys that you think have a chance or guys that show up throughout training camp. I don't think that there were, once you got to the end of training camp and the dust kind of settled as far as some of those injuries and things go, that there were a bunch of surprises. Maybe there was one or two guys that there was discussion about, but for the most part, I think it's pretty clear once you figure out some of the injury stuff that you work through during training camp.
Thank you.
Jake?
Hey, Brian, you had mentioned over the summer that you were kind of anticipating certain ways that teams would approach the new kickoff and everything. Did you see what you expected to, and do you feel pretty confident in what other teams are going to do throughout the season at this point, or is it still kind of just trial by error and seeing what other teams are doing?
No, I think there certainly is going to be more trick kicks, line drive kicks. There's going to be a variety of different things that we're going to see early in this season. Usually, most teams would keep it very vanilla in preseason, but unlike in the past, there were more teams that were doing some of those line drive kicks, trick kicks, short kicks, and experimenting with things in the preseason that you normally would not see because I think some people maybe they didn't have joint practice to be able to experiment with some of those things, or maybe they just were trying different things to see what they wanted to do in the regular season. So you already saw some of that in preseason, which you normally wouldn't see. I think you're going to see even more of that. Certainly nobody wants to kick the ball short of the landing zone, but inevitably it's going to happen to everyone this season when you start to try to work with short kicks or trick kicks to try and give your kickoff team more of an advantage to get the ball rolling around. The advantage would be once the ball hits the ground in the landing zone, the returner doesn't have the ball, so he can't set up his return or get the return going while the kickoff team is covering. So it is a big advantage for the kickoff team if you can get the ball on the ground. I think you're going to see a lot of people experimenting with some of those things, and people might even at the start of the season be like, "Whoa, what's going on with some of these kicks?" Or, "Oh, he mishit a kick." Well, really, I don't think it's going to be mishit kicks. People are going to intentionally try to hit some funky or dirty kicks to mess with returners to try and give the kickoff team an advantage. And if you do kick it short, it goes to the 40-yard line. If you kick it short of the landing zone, it goes short of the 20, it goes to the 40-yard line, but that's a 5-yard penalty from a touchback. So it's not quite as punitive as kicking a touchback because a touchback goes to the 35. So I think you'll see some people certainly that are willing to risk that and play with some different things that will make the play look a little bit different.
Do a few more here, James.
This is a might be a dumb question, but look at Anthony Gould and he's a kick returner, a punt returner. Obviously, that's not super rare, in the NFL. But when you identify a player that can do both, what stands out to you?
Well, it certainly is more challenging to field punts than it is to field kickoffs. Traditionally, a ball that's spinning end over end on a kickoff, especially in the old model where there's a bunch more hang time, it's easier to sit underneath the ball. It's easier to judge the ball. It's easier to be able to catch the ball. Plus, whenever you're catching the ball as a kickoff returner, there's always going to be space between you and the defender, so you have time. You're not worried about getting hit while fielding the ball. So to find somebody that's a really good punt returner takes, you have to be more fearless. You have to be more poised. You have to be able to track the ball, which is harder to do. There's also going to be people and gunners that are in your face as you do it. So finding somebody that you really trust to be able to track the ball well, have good ball security, make good decisions, all those things are really important for the punt returner. And when you can find somebody that's really explosive and has great speed and elusiveness to get the return started on top of those decision-making things, you've got somebody that's really special. And I think if you have a punt returner that's explosive and elusive, that makes good decisions, in the new kickoff model, he can be a good kickoff returner. So you can find some of those really good punt returners that can now be able to make that translate into the kickoff model, because the new kickoff model kind of ends up becoming a little bit like a punt return play at times, because the players get on top of the returner a little bit faster. Everybody's on body, kind of like you would be in a punt return. You're not having the kickoff return guy set back 30, 35 yards with space. So you can end up seeing, maybe some more dual returners if you have somebody back there you can really trust and has the explosive ability.
We can finish up today with Jake.
You'd mentioned some of those bubble guys getting the reps later in the summer. So Daniel Scott had the pick six against the Bengals, which in itself everyone could see as a big play. But I think it was Shane mentioned that tackle he had on punt return was like huge as well. So you as a special teams coach, how much does something like that like really fire you up or make that stand out to you, despite having a big play like a pick six that everyone would pay attention to?
Yeah, no, Daniel Scott, continues to improve. Obviously, we knew there was going to be some, hurdles or some things with him coming back after 2 years of being injured, that there's, going to be some rust and things. But I think he continued to get better throughout training camp. I think he's really smart. He, has a history of being a really good special teams player in college. So he's a versatile guy that can play a variety of different positions. And you can trust him to do his job. And he's got good athletic ability and play strength to kind of fit a lot of those safety roles or hybrid roles that somebody like him can do. And then as you see him continue to get better every week, the play that he made on punt, he was the PP. He was able to quick release down the field. There's a lot of space between him and the returner. He makes a great open field tackle, uses great technique and fundamentals to be able to do it. It was a great play. It was a really, really impressive play, and was excited to see him, obviously be able to finish and make that play.